Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Is the city maintaining all of this property?
No. I can't speak to that.
Some of them we do, obviously. Now, the degree to which we maintain is a subjective matter, but the ones that are in bold are the active buildings that we occupy, so there is some maintenance there. Others may be abandoned houses that we're in the process of having them demolished. Others are abandoned houses that are mothballed. So there's no maintenance being done on those other than maybe once or twice a season lawn cutting. Others are places where the structure has been demolished, and then we cut the grass as often as we can, which is not very often.
May I ask another question? Are any of these parcels available for sale?
Most of them are available for sale. They're held in something called the city's land bank. The application and purchase procedure for the land bank is an ominous procedure. The individual wishing to purchase the land must make application to the land bank. So first, the individual or organization must know that the land is held in the city's land bank, and we give that list to anyone who asks for it. They must make application. There's a process contained in the city's codified ordinances that once the application is made, the Building and Housing Department or the land bank notifies the adjacent property owners that there's a sale or there's an offer on the land, gives anybody and everybody a chance to bid on the land. The bids are sealed. They're submitted to our Building and Housing Department. There's then a meeting called of the Neighborhood Advisory Council, which is basically a committee that reviews all applications and determines in its judgment whether or not it should recommend something for sale or some sort of transfer. Then once that committee's work is done, the transfer, the recommendation is made to the City Council along with the appraised value of the land and a recommendation to sell it for X amount, and City Council has to approve or disapprove of that. It takes a few minutes to explain it, and it sounds like it takes a long time. It takes even longer than it sounds.
Is it widely known that these properties are available for
We
sale?
make every effort to let people know that. Yeah, whether people receive the information or not, that's up to the individual. But we do have applications for those properties. We do make people who express interest in some sort of property in the city, we do our best to make them aware that they exist. Most of them, under normal market conditions, where there is a willing buyer, most of them there's not a willing buyer. But where there is a willing buyer, we put it through that process, and sometimes it comes out with a sale, other times it comes out with there's no sale.
You have each one of these properties appraised. So through the land bank for East Cleveland, how does these already appraised properties affect the individual that comes in to buy? Now, when they come in, they have to get an appraisal. These properties I see here are already appraised. So what is?
Right.
Do we go by this one, or do we go by?
Yeah, that's a tough question. This is appraised, the county appraises them at. What the market value is of those, I can't speak to.
Right.
So it's what somebody's willing to pay for this. It could be considerably lower.
To answer the question that was put, these values that you see here as the appraisal, these would not be the values that are considered if the property is up for sale. There's an independent appraisal that's required per existing city ordinance.
I'm aware of that because when the individual comes in, they have on the application it says the appraisal, and you get your appraisal. And some of these properties that are going for 12, that is appraised here for 12,000, and actually you got one over here that's appraised for 27,000. So we're talking about apples and oranges because when they come out, they are willing to pay X amount of dollars. So that's not really looking at this, great to see what it's worth, but it is not helping the revenue generation at all.
Alrighty, my final bit is on A55 and A56. These are, as the title says, capital asset needs as identified by city management. Sat down with the police chief, the fire chief, chief of staff, and kind of went through and said, what would your department need if you had your druthers? So fire, we listed what they currently have, and then each chief opined on what state regulations are for their vehicles, what the vehicles currently have, what their needs currently are, and then a dollar amount was put to the needs. Fire, police on page A55. A56 has service department. And then citywide, I mean, we know that the streets are in need of help. We know that our water and sewer lines, and the chief of staff said there's a lot of breaks going on daily, and you can't keep up with all of them at this point. So the cost of having an inventory, a good inventory in those departments, fixing things, replacing streetlights, replacing different, like the traffic cameras, software, radio systems, just, there's a lot of assets. And again, a lot of this is a wish list. But there's a lot of things that you know, need, like the mayor said, if there's a pothole, that other budget doesn't account for a lot of that stuff. And then the last part of this was there was a quest to talk about merger, annexation, bankruptcy. There was also some discussion on the effect on the school district. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend down there, Melissa, and let her take us home.
We have a question.
That's okay.
I have a question on the replacement, water and sewer lines, the replacement in general of infrastructure. And I particularly noticed the water and sewer lines, estimated cost to replace is $50 million. I'm assuming that's citywide.
Citywide.
But the thing that struck me is on A1, the infrastructure for water and sewer lines is valued at $796,000 with only $74,000, well, almost $75,000 of accumulated depreciation. It makes it look like they're in great shape when we know they're not.
Right. It's that's historical cost that's on there. The depreciated probably should be increased a little bit based on the levels. I mean, in meeting with the chief of staff, he said they need some work.
Our infrastructure is in absolutely horrible shape, and it's a tremendous expense to repair, and it will get worse. And I don't mean to interject those types of words into the conversation, but I wouldn't interject them if they weren't fully appropriate and then some.
Well, I believe that, but I'm just looking at the schedule, and it doesn't look that way on the schedule.
Right. Objects in mirror may be larger than they appear.
You're larger than they are.
Yeah.
So corny.
It's not funny. It's not funny.
Yeah, historical cost is a big key, it's not
Yes.
present value.
It's not present.
These
And quite frankly, it's good that we all understand that this is a historical cost and not the present value. So actually, I'm glad you asked the question to underscore. These are old numbers, and the depreciation numbers are not necessarily the newest numbers.
Right.
Madam Chairman, you ready for it?
That,
You had asked for some information on merger and annexation, and Melissa's done some research on that and included some material on that. I know this is going to be a lengthy meeting, and I'm not sure that there's a lot of benefit to our going through numbers of signatures and when they have to be filed. If you would like that, we can do that. I think that perhaps from our point of view, the more salient issues are on bankruptcy and perhaps on some issues that have been raised about the impact on school systems if there is some type of annexation or merger. Whatever the pleasure of the commission is, we're happy to do it.
Thank you for turning around where we can hear you with your bagpipes, so we appreciate you turning around. Just saying.
I just want to be sure we focus on what you want us to talk about here. It sounds to me like merger and annexation have been discussed, and there may be some difference of opinion here as to what is the appropriate course. We certainly don't intend to interject our opinions on those things. But we're open to whatever you want to hear from us. You have specific questions about merger annexation, if you want Melissa to do an overview of it, if you want us to move on to bankruptcy, which we have some issues about, and also there have been some issues raised about the education of that.
What is the pleasure of the commission?
High level.
I don't know. I definitely, because the school district has definitely come up on more than several occasions, definitely that, maybe just a high level on the merger annexation, and then more in depth on.
It's a wonderful idea, and she can do a kind of a brief overview of that. As I said, I don't want to get down into the weeds of detail as to how many signatures, how many days. Just the concept that there are various methods for annexation and merger, how bankruptcy generally works, although Chapter 9 bankruptcies work in a myriad number of ways, and also some issues as to impact of the Ohio Department of Education and how that works, which again can be a little bit difficult to determine. But Ms. Crocker can give you an overview on that. Maybe you have some questions, we can get into a discussion if that might be helpful.
Great. And is this going to include bankruptcy and?
Yes.
Yes.
Now again, as I said, the bankruptcy, we're not bankruptcy lawyers, and we don't have, and even bankruptcy lawyers, we're not bankrupt lawyers or bankruptcy lawyers at this point, but even bankruptcy lawyers don't handle Chapter 9s very often. And also, a Chapter 9 is distinctly different from the normal bankruptcy for an individual, and it can go a whole number of different ways depending on whether you're Detroit or Harrisburg or East Cleveland. There's a lot of different things that can happen in bankruptcy. Did I take all your time? Is that
Yeah. I'm going to start with a brief overview of merger and annexation. Then. There are two ways to go about doing a merger. There's a merger by petition. How that begins is both cities, in this case, would put together a petition proposing a merger. It would then be filed with the County Board of Elections. It would then be approved by the County Board of Elections, meaning that they would make sure all the signatures were there and they were correct. And then it would be put into an election. If it's approved by a majority of the voters, each city would elect, I believe it was 5 commissioners to a commission. That commission would come up with the conditions of the merger. If both cities agree on the conditions and the majority of voters vote for the conditions, then the merger by petition would take place. A merger by agreement begins when both legislative authorities of both cities agree to a merger and adopt by 2/3 vote a resolution proposing a merger. The legislative authorities would then enter into a merger agreement that must be exactly the same in both cities. It would specify the conditions of the merger. And again, if that agreement is approved by the majority of voters in each city, it would then take place. Annexation, there are 3 ways to go about it. There's annexation by ordinance, which means that the legislative authority would propose annexation through an ordinance, and it would appoint 3 commissioners to a commission in which it would negotiate with the other city. It would then, after deciding on what would take place in the annexation, it would be proposed as an ordinance. The other city would designate 3 commissioners, and then after they would vote, if they agree, again, it would take place. Annexation by petition begins with the residents of both cities filing it again, similar to merger by petition, stating they would desire to be annexed. They would then appoint 3 commissioners, as with the other city. They would again decide on the terms of annexation. If the commissioners can come to an agreement that annexation by petition occurs. Annexation by assent occurs when the legislative authorities of both cities agree to the annexation. In this case, that waives the obligation to have an election, and the annexation by assent would occur. I'll go a little more in depth about bankruptcy.
Just to clarify, because the term is being used interchangeably here, what the petitions that we had previously been discussing was for annexation. So would it be, this is very quick way and maybe very unartful way of terming it, but would it be fair to say that in a merger, two, in this case, cities would become a new city, where in annexation, the property of one city would be annexed to another, and that larger territory would be,
It's relatively the same. In this case, from my understanding, City of East Cleveland would become part of Cleveland. You would not be creating a new city.
I think conceptually you're correct, Madam Chairman. I think that the merger concept implies the joinder of two becoming a new, but I think that it must have that the practical effect is limited. You have conditions of it, they agree to those conditions. I've seen it, quite commonly you see merger done with a township and surrounding a city, a municipality, and they are merged and then they create a new city. But I think conceptually, it ends up being essentially the same arrangement.
So Chapter 9 bankruptcy occurs when a taxing authority gets approval by the state tax commissioner to file a petition stating that the subdivision is insolvent, unable to meet its debts as they mature, and it desires to effect a plan for the readjustment of its debts. Those are the three main criteria for being able to file for bankruptcy. The petition is filed with the United States Circuit Court of Appeals, and then in the Circuit Court of Appeals, that judge will appoint a specific bankruptcy judge to oversee. While the bankruptcy case is ongoing, a stay is put in place, which means that all collections have to stop against the debtor, which would be the city. Chapter 9 requires a municipality to create a debt restructuring plan, which the court can either approve or reject. They do take into account the input of creditors. The plan would provide for different classes of debt, which means that they would go through every type of debt you have and provide on how you would deal with it, basically. The plan would be determined by the court, and it has to be feasible and in the best interest of the creditors. It does not discharge all of a municipality's debts. Usually does not. It simply reduces them. It's not your typical bankruptcy where you think of that it's all just gone. It's not like that. The municipality does have wide discretion on how to handle its debts. For example, it can sell city-owned assets, it can cut severance pay, and interfere with union contracts. And it is only a past and present solution. It does not do anything for future debts or future debts incurred, and it will not guarantee for the resolution of the city's structural imbalance.
The one important thing, I think, that many times when we think of bankruptcy, we think about a discharge of debts. We think about a wiping out of debts. I used to practice bankruptcy law when I was in private practice, and there's a Chapter 7. And traditionally, a Chapter 7 was where an individual went in and said, I don't have much in the way of assets, I have a lot of debts, and those debts are basically wiped out or generally gone. But individuals also could go through a Chapter 13. Corporations could go through a 13 or an 11, and those are reorganizations. They're not wiping out debt, they're wiping out some, but they're reorganizing. Give me time and I can make it work. Give me some additional, keep these creditors off my back for a period of time, and we'll make this, we'll reorganize, we'll streamline, we'll cut costs, we'll make it work. That's similar to what happens here. You have to go to bankruptcy court, you have to propose to the court a plan. You've seen a number of plans here, you have to have a plan. And you have to say, we're going to cut here, we're going to reduce this. There are committees of creditors that are selected, and those creditors have input on what they think is fair, and the court ultimately makes a determination as to what's fair to the parties. So again, it's not the concept of a quick wipeout, it's just a matter of a reorganization, a restructuring, reductions, and fairness throughout for all the parties. As Melissa points out, it doesn't have anything to do with, generally bankruptcy doesn't have an impact on future claims. There's nothing, if you persist in spending habits in the future, it doesn't change anything. The one thing that was raised in some of these scenarios, when they talked about the potential for reducing the claims of some of the city's creditors, that, what I referred to when I was in private practice, is a composition of creditors. And a composition of creditors is usually when someone says, here are my assets and here are my debts. I can't pay my debts with these assets. So you go to your creditors and say, here's the deal. If you have to sue me, if you have to go after me, if you have to try to collect, you're not going to get a lot. There's not much here. And it may take you a long time and cost a lot of money to do it. So a composition with creditors says, I can pay you 50%, I can pay you whatever the percentage is. Will you accept that as a full settlement? And if all the creditors accept this as a full settlement, that can be done. That's kind of an informal insolvency proceeding through bankruptcy court, but there's no stay, and there's no court to order that something happen at the end of the day.
But when you have that, you have to have the money to do that. And also,
Yes.
prior to the new law coming in for bankruptcy, did they not wipe away all of your debts at that point?
Well, for an individual under Chapter 7, there was a time. It's been some time. I mean, I've been out of practice for a while, and when I practiced, we did that. But that's been changed. Now virtually every Chapter 7 individual must pay something. If they have income, they have to pay something. That was an analogy. I didn't mean to imply that Chapter 7 applies to. Chapter 9 is a chapter, and yes, that the individual, you're not going to wipe out those debts, and as I said, but the composition is similar to this arrangement because you're asking creditors to accept a certain payment on the dollar. Now, you clearly have to have some money to pay them. But what you're conveying to your creditors is, look, if you have to come after me, I don't have much. If you look at the equitable insolvency is a term that's sometimes used. Railroads sometimes were referred to as being equitably insolvent. The railroads had lots and lots of assets, but nobody wanted to buy them. They were rolling stock and rights of way and roundhouses and whatever, and nobody was buying them. That's equitable insolvency. On paper, I have assets, but I can't transform that into cash in order to pay my debts. So you try to convey to your creditors, you're better off to take this rather than try to come after me to collect money when you're not going to get a whole lot.
If I may, a couple of things that I heard, one of which is, we're talking Chapter 9. 9 is different than a personal bankruptcy. 9 does not wipe out all debts.
It doesn't. You come up with a plan. What happened, Detroit is an example. What happened in Detroit, their biggest problem was pensions. Detroit had internal pensions. That was their problem. We don't. We don't have pensions in the village. And so they had employees and they had retired employees who were saying, wait a minute, we need to have a say on this. And so they worked out a mechanism where they had agreements by the committees of their creditors, because they have a claim to pensions, and they worked out agreements where they reduced future amounts. They did a lot of, similar to what PRS has done in the last couple of years in trying to reduce claims and projected claims. And they did that with other creditors as well. They had a committee. They said, here's what we can pay you. We can't pay you anymore. They were particularly concerned in Detroit in protecting certain assets. Apparently the city of Detroit had a considerable amount of artwork that was in there on display. They did not want to lose that, and so they wanted to protect that. So to protect that, they came up with other agreements. Also, Michigan has different laws, and there was some interjection of state funds, but again, that's a different, they work differently there. So you get the committees together, and then the court starts looking at the realities of saying, how would these creditors come out if this bankruptcy plan was not accepted? If the creditors would come out better without this bankruptcy plan, then the court won't approve it. It's got to be something which is fair to the creditors and also protects the city as well.
And I know you spoke, it was the last, I know you spoke to the fact that bankruptcy is different, whether it's Harrisburg, whether it's, Detroit, it looks and acts differently. But there are at least some similarities, receivership.
Yeah, there are similarities. The court does not, as I understand it, the court does not have to appoint a trustee. Routinely, in other chapters of bankruptcy, a trustee is appointed, just as a matter of course, they appoint a trustee. The bankruptcy court in Chapter 9 does not have to appoint a receiver or a master to oversee it. They commonly do, but they don't have to. So you would have a receiver or a master, someone to oversee this and the plan proposals. So it's distinct from the other chapters, because in the other chapters, you always have a trustee.
So in this case, would a receiver then, when you say look after, administer the plan, part of that plan is how to pay the debtors. So would part of that also be, I hate to say control, but also limiting the expenditures of the city while they're in bankruptcy?
I don't think so. I think maybe the use of the word receiver may be misleading in this situation, because in this situation, as I understand it, the receiver does not take control of the assets. In a traditional bankruptcy, the receiver actually becomes the owner of the bankrupt estate and takes those and then distributes them. In this situation, the city continues to operate, the city continues to expend funds, the city continues to do all the things cities do. But the plan is then put in place, it's reviewed. I think that the role of the trustee in this situation is to assist the parties in coming to an agreement and overseeing that process. Once that plan is in place, then the city pays over the money, it's distributed, and that's how it works. So the receiver has a different role, doesn't become the operator, doesn't become the controller, and doesn't take title to assets.
Any questions of the commission?
And then you had a couple comments on education. Was that an issue?
Yes,
that you're concerned about
it
as
is.
well?
Especially, for purposes of full disclosure, this is the treasurer of the East Cleveland School District sitting to my left.
Okay, I'm gonna go, you had mentioned that it's an issue, so I'm gonna go into a little more detail. For sake of brevity, I'm gonna use the words transferring board, which is the Board of Education for the school district from which territory will be transferred, so the city of East Cleveland. And receiving board, which is where we would be annexed to or merged with. The procedure when district is annexed by a municipal corporation is first, if the annexed territory comprises part but not all of the territory of a school district, which is my understanding that that's the case here. The transferring district, if it wishes to transfer the school district, it will become part of the school district upon approval of the State Board of Education. The school district must attempt to negotiate with the receiving board, and the state board can approve the transfer once it receives a resolution requesting approval by the receiving board, and a statement signed and with the terms among a few other technical issues. Transfer of a territory to adjoining city. The transfer must be advisable, and 75% of owners of real property must give written consent to do this. The transferring board must negotiate the terms of the transfer with the receiving board. The transferring board must file their proposal with the State Board of Education prior to April and even numbered year. It's a little technical, but the State Board may provide for a public hearing so that people can hear why this is occurring. The State Board must approve or disapprove the proposed transfer no later than September 1st after receiving the proposal. Within 30 days of approval of transfer, the transferring board must adopt a resolution transferring the territory to the receiving board. The transfer is completed once the receiving board adopts a resolution accepting the transfer. The third option is the transfers of territory initiated by state or local board. So the Board of Education of the city school would pass a resolution requesting the entire school district to be transferred to another city. It would submit the resolution to the State Board of Education. The State Board would pass a resolution proposing transfer of territory from the transferring district to the receiving district and file the resolution with the boards of each school district. and at least 30 days after the adoption of the resolution, at the state board's regular meeting, we'll have the resolution placed on the ballot, and then if the ballot is submitted to a general or special or primary election, if the majority of qualified electors residing in the transferring school district vote to approve the transfer, the state board will conduct it. So it will be transferred.
Is that the, because the mayor has taunted the fact that the school would not be part of the emergency. But if Cleveland is under a mayoral, the mayor is under control, and it comes to the fact that there's already everything, a school district there that's under the mayor's control. So it would work the same way as you're saying?
If it's through a merger, then it's not required that your school district transfer.
Okay.
Annexation,
So we're doing an annexation.
so that would be, again, it has to be advisable, 75% of the owners have to give written consent of it. It's not automatic that your
Yeah,
school district will be sent. It has to be requested.
It's not automatic because it's not contiguous with the school district is not contiguous with the city, is that correct?
Yeah, so since your school district is not entirely within the city of East Cleveland limits, it is not required that it be transferred. So you have to get it.
Because you have an elementary school in Cleveland Heights,
Yeah.
Caledonia.
So it's not automatic that it would be transferred to Cleveland.
Not automatic, but if the city that you're transferring, that annexing to says, okay, I'm not going to just take the city, I want all of it, and I want the school too. So then it has to be a different type of negotiation or still dealing with the stakeholders.
The receiving city just doesn't have to accept the annexation. They can refuse the annexation if they don't want to take the annexation for whatever reason.
I'm not saying that if they don't want to take it. I'm saying if they want to take it, which we don't know because some is saying okay, some is saying no. But I'm saying, I'm talking about the school district. If I'm coming and annexing to Cleveland, and Cleveland had a mayoral interest there, so he's not just going to not going to accept just one part of it.
It's not his decision
Okay.
whether it's
Okay.
It's not, in this case, I assume you're talking about Cleveland, it's not Cleveland's decision that you have to transfer your school district. It's put it either to a vote by the public, so it'd be put to a vote in the city of East Cleveland.
But it's still a matter of time. It's there. It's not safe. If say for instance, if the stakeholders, the residents or whatever, decide they don't want it to go nowhere, it stays. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you vote against the transfer of the school district, it would not change.
Okay, so it's in our jurisdiction to do.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
The statutory language says the transferring district, if the transferring district wishes to transfer the school district. So if you don't wish to transfer the school district,
Then you don't have to.
That is right.
So at this point, the wishes of the
But
city is not to transfer anything.
just to go to your point,
It
it looks like you're looking at 331106, and that is actually specifically for annexation, just so you know, since that's what you are doing.
right, well, that's what you're
Yeah.
discussing.
Yeah, but there are three options here. I just wanted to be clear that the first one is just for annexation, and that would probably be what you would be looking at since you are doing annexation.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So if the city of Cleveland wished to take East Cleveland schools, they would file a territory transfer with ODE, correct?
Yes.
Do I understand that it would be a territory
Are
transfer?
you talking about one of the options here? Are you talking about second one to transfer territory to the adjoining city.
Yes, for the school.
Yeah.
ODE has to approve any transfer since these are not contiguous. They're not, it's not an automatic transfer. I understand it's not automatic. It has to be approved by ODE.
But it could be initiated by Cleveland. And East Cleveland has an opportunity then to attend the hearing and object. Am I right?
And I believe that is correct, and I believe then the Iowa Department of Education has to make a determination that it's in the best interest of the children to have the territorial, merged into a sense, or made one. It is not automatic though, but it's up to ODE, and it's the best interest of the test.
Any other questions?